Hello, welcome to the fifth episode of Settle, Thrive, and Belong. Last year, I started with the first season of Facebook Live information session, Thursdays at 2, where we addressed some of the challenges our communities were facing and brought you the expert in the field to provide information and clarification around topics related to the pandemic. The program received a lot of support from all of you, and I'm very grateful for your support that you've given to us. This year, we've decided to focus on the journey of newcomers. Today, we mark over 17 months since the pandemic started in Canada. This pandemic has changed our lives in ways we have not thought of before. It's impacted our lives, works, school, and even how we interact with our loved ones. It's brought many challenges to our daily routine and taught us new ways of working, living, and surviving. This pandemic has proved that we survive together as a community and that we all have a part to partake in our society. From the TTC drivers to the cashier workers to doctors and nurses, essential workers have put their own lives at risk to make sure that we can still get food to our table and receive treatment that we need. We are all in this together, and this pandemic will make us more resilient, is a sentence that we have repeatedly heard over social media, news articles, and pretty much about everywhere. What does resilient really mean? How do we become more resilient? And what are the challenges on the road to resilience? These are some of the questions we continue to ask on our show. In today's sessions, my guest, Jay, who is the training coordinator at North York Community House, will help me not just find answers to these questions, but also find meanings from the challenges and opportunities from the struggles we face. Jay will guide us through his personal and professional experience on how to reframe and reflect on our experiences. My guest today, Jay Hahn, been in the field of adult education, training, and facilitation for the last 5 years, facilitating various programs such as diversity and inclusion, conflict resolution, employment preparation communication, and coaching to staff members at various organizations and local community residents. He had been working in the field of healthcare, information technology, social service, and community development. He is currently the training coordinator at North York Community House and as a life coach and independent practitioner. Jay, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure having you here, and I'm very, very excited for our discussion today.
Yeah, thank you, Tarek, so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on this, and I look forward to share my perspective and my life stories.
Wonderful. I've been looking for this session for a while now, and I can't wait to ask you all about our topic today. But before I jump into that, I do want to know, it's been 17 months so far since the first lockdown. How are you doing through all of this, and how were you navigating through it?
So to be really honest, last year when it first went into lockdown, I had my set of plans for 2020, and then I couldn't act on those plans because of the lockdown and pandemic. So it was really frustrating period last year. So I went through a series of emotions, and I think I decided to take advantage of the lockdown then decided to pick up a few hobbies, such as painting, running, or learning to play guitar. But thing is, none of them stuck. So, I'm still exploring the different hobbies out there. So if you have any ideas, I'm all ears.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I hear you. I have tried different things. Some work, some don't. Some just not my areas of expertise. Um, and I how was it like being in lockdown and seeing almost the world collapsing outside? Like it's globally, we were not the only one facing it. Though it was brought to my attention that Toronto was one of the cities that experienced lockdown for the longest out of any other city. So yeah, how was it like being a part of the longest lockdown?
Well, you go through mix of emotions. I mean, I'm not, I'm very, don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for the job I have, but working from home and staying home for the most of my time was not really that exciting.
Mhm.
So I tried to occupy myself with, hobbies or work, or school. I'm a part-time student, so that helps in keeping my time occupied, as well as entertaining myself through different hobbies. But there is I'm feeling a little bit, I'm getting a little bit tired of this lockdown, staying home and working from home, but at the same time feeling gratitude towards what I have. So it's dynamics of emotions that I go through every day, but just feeling exhausted overall. At the same time, grateful because a lot of people in Toronto are not as fortunate as I am to have full-time employment. So I'm very grateful, and all of my loved ones are intact and healthy. So I'm grateful for that as well.
That is very true. Uh, Jay, I today's our topic. We're talking about different things. We're talking about resilience. We're talking about how to make sense and meaning of everything. We're talking about finding opportunities. But I I do want to know a little bit about your story. Who is Jay, and why today's topic matter to you?
Whoa, okay. Usually the I'm feeling nervous because I don't usually get to share my story on public. I don't think I've done ever. So this is bear with me because I'm feeling a little bit nervous. I came here as an immigrant. I came here when I was 12. I remember I didn't speak, a word of English. So it has been a difficult journey that I had to overcome here, and a lot of obstacles and challenges and setbacks. And I understand that a lot of immigrants, newcomers will understand this, that we are required to force to face our obstacles. We are almost faced with obstacles as we readjust our lifestyle here in a new country. And there's so many different changes here. There's a you have the new social connections, the friendships, and all the connections you had back home. Those are gone, and there's new language you need to learn, and new culture, and new social norms, new ways of doing things, and it just adjustments period, a transition period. It's quite daunting. Not
Mhm.
only it is stressful, but you're forced to rethink yourself on how you see yourself. I will get to that later, but in a nutshell, I was forced to adapt to new environment and forced to see myself in a different lens, and that can be tough. So the topic of resilience is somewhat personal to me because I had to overcome the challenges in my own way. And through those obstacles, time of obstacles and challenges, that gave me a sense of purpose, some of meaning, to what I do now. But at the time, it was definitely time of pain and
Mhm.
hurt, which I had to navigate for sure. Does that answer your question? I know that was a little bit personal, but I didn't go into detail.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I do want to acknowledge that it's not easy to share our stories in the first place, not to mention sharing them on a public platform. Um, how, if you don't mind me asking, how did it, uh, how were you able to make that meaning out of your story? I mean, I do resonate with you on many levels, right? I came here, I didn't speak the language, I had those struggles here and there, and navigating through them is quite tough. Um, but you've managed not just to navigate through them, but also find inspiration in them. That you found a way where you're connecting to your purpose through those challenges, through your experiences. And I don't want to call your experiences always challenges, because as what we've discussed before, it's like those are the light on your journey, right? And as tough as they could be at times, they're in a way guidance and preparation for later on, from what previous discussions between the two of us. So I would love to hear about how that connection happened between, the struggling aspect, going through those experiences, into being able to have not just a that purpose that came from them, but help others find their purpose and connect through those experiences to other people and other newcomers.
Yeah. It's like it's not a simple journey. It just has been. I've gone through a lot, and there's several different stages of different emotions, different struggles, different labels of that each step. Um, but when I first came here, if I want to walk you through my story, there's that definite like feelings of hurt and grief of things losing some of the things I had back home. I'm not talking about material things here, but it's almost like the self-perception.
Mhm.
Because when I was back home, I saw myself as person who as a student who loves challenges, who person who's always doing really well in academics, and person who loves language, who loves writing, right? And person who has a lot of friends, and person who sees a lot of potentials and opportunities for himself. And coming here around age 12 or 13, speaking little English, then all of a sudden your self-perception changes to I mean, my grades were suffering in high school and middle school because by the academics was not in my radar. I was learning language. I didn't even comprehend teachers instructions, what frames were saying to me. So making friends or even comprehending teachers instructions were so difficult, which made me suffer academically a lot. Not only that, but navigating new culture and how to communicate in Canadian style, right? They were also different. So there were a lot of adjustment in Canada, living here as a middle school student. But I then see myself as someone who's struggling in academic, someone who's afraid to do something wrong, do something that's maybe other people make fun of, or just not seeing myself as a person who loves challenges or see that full potentials I had once before. So I can see that there's a self-doubt kicking in. But the biggest thing I would say was I'm not seeing myself as a full human being or a full capable student, because I see myself and how others see me was you need help. You need to depend on someone. And most of my early days that was true. Like I need to depend on someone who speaks English fluently to communicate, to do the translation for me. Then I begin to see myself as not full body person. And that really hurt. That really hurt because someone who's seeing, fully able, fully capable to someone who was an ESL student. And that label, carried me through 5 or 6 years, an ESL student. And there's a negative connotation attached to that. You can't do this by yourself. You can't communicate by yourself. And that was really hurtful. And it took me a long time to wrap my head around that new recognition, new perception. But eventually, going through my university and recognizing my failures and failed attempts of getting into grad schools and whatnot, I volunteered at a nonprofit organization where I was helping other Korean students. And I come from Korea, who came here as middle school or high school students and barely speaking English. I was able to connect with them better, and it almost like there's an instant connection because I understand their struggles and they understand what I've gone through. So it's just feeling instant struggle, and the words of comfort and empathy I provided through that personal connection was easy because I understand what they went through, and they really appreciated my support and my guidance, and I think in that time I felt inspired. I see that all of those pain and hurt experiences coming together and creating that sense of purpose, as you were talking about, right? But it has been a long stage. It's not like, oh, I'm going to use this experience in the time being that I'm suffering to do something good for the others. Whereas, I'm processing this feelings of hurt, loss, grief, but I'm experiencing that and using that experience, maybe say 5, 6 years later, to do something good for others, because I've gone through that and I understand what others are going through, similar to my circumstance.
Wow, that's very, very powerful. It's like your experience came in a full circle, right? From having those difficulties, the challenges that you mentioned, the language barrier, that whole loss of identity, right? It's like I'm now not even a full thing. Like I'm not a full human being, because I need to
Mm-hmm.
rely on. I am I am dependent, though I don't want to be, and I have been independent. And it's like now people don't get me. I don't want this support, but it's not like I have an option. Um, and like that loss of control, right? To like being able to, and as what you mentioned, probably at that time as you were going through the experiences, you're like, that's it. Like for me, it's tough, it's challenging. You're in a lot of experiencing different emotions, and then later on, years later, um, you got to meet those other students who went through similar journey, and you're like, well, now I know why all of this kind of came together. I could connect to those people in a way probably not many other people could, because they don't have that experience. It's like when you say, I understand what you're going through, they know that you do. And they know that they could trust you, and they could, you know, accept your guidance in a way where it doesn't feel as less of a human as it felt before for you. Wow, that's very, very powerful. And it speaks of the resilience that you have, Jay, and that you guide um, everyone to kind of see and build and experience and understand even more. Jay, what talking about resilience? What is resilience, and what does it mean to your community, my community, our communities? What does that word mean, and how does Jay see resilience?
Mm-hmm. Um, it's really difficult to define resilience in one single sentence, but I would say the resilience is, the desire to motivation to keep going despite the struggle, despite the obstacles. And not just that, but there is a kind of deeper sense of understanding why that is important to you, right? For me, I hadn't had that feeling of motivation in my life and what do I want to do with my life and what I was passionate about. I didn't get that until I had that experience of connecting with the Korean youth who came here. Um, but once I had that inspiration, motivation, then things were easier because I see that as more of a steps, opportunities, getting myself better in helping others in reaching that inspiration, motivation, right? So I think resilience is not just, you know, take these, thinking yourself, reframing those events as positively as, I'm going to use these as a learning opportunity, embodying my growth mindset. I'm going to see the positive light in everything. But sometimes it's so difficult when you don't have a motivation to do so, to embody that learning or growth mindset on those pain. But it's more like you're feeling motivated and inspired to do so, to keep going and knowing what is important to you in your life so that you can focus on things that matter to you while not so hung up on other obstacles and challenges you face, and you can decide what's more important, what's not more important. You can let some of them go, but it's just understanding what matters to you and keep going to reach that, to be a better service to other people. I think that is one key to be resilient. Does that answer your question? I know I
Yeah,
said
yeah,
multiple
no, it
things.
does. I I love how you connected it to not just your own self and what would benefit you. Like you don't build a resilience so you're just stronger next time, but also it's like how would that resilience serve you and those around you, and how do you put it in service of others? um and I think that that is an important concept because it sounds like that connects to the purpose, right? That connects to something. It's like that connection to something higher and bigger than yourself.
Mhm.
And finding yourself doing that is in a way finding that meaning and that purpose.
By no means,
I
I'm
do
not
want to, yeah.
suggesting, sorry, but I'm not suggesting that, the people, this is the only way to inspire yourself. I mean, the people, inspire themselves, find their purpose differently. But, I'm speaking from my own experience that motivating myself, I need that, higher sense of purpose as we're talking about, connecting to lives of others, to the community at large. And that's how I see myself in defining purpose, defining resilience.
And I guess that's a very important note that you mentioned. And I guess this season have been focused on that. We have been looking at resilience from every corner this season, and it all looks different, and it all is approached in a different way. And we've been asking the question of what is resilience, and not that there is one definition that fits what that means, but rather every experience has a way to define what what resilience look like. And it's just beautiful to have so many unique experiences and outlook on resilience, and how does it connect to people's life, and what could we learn from it. And that's what you said. It's like this isn't an option. It's not the way. There is no such a thing as the way that works for everyone, but this is something that in your experience has worked, and other people's experiences may also have worked, and you've worked with other people who were supported by this very method. So it's kind of like this discovery of what you're trying to share to the world, and that purpose that you're. I
Mhm.
do want to know, Jay, where how do you develop all of that? Like, how do you get to the point where you develop that resilience, and if you already have it, how do you kind of bring it up a level, or become a bit more resilient than you already are?
Mhm. Um, and so, as I mentioned, I think there are so many different factors. Even like seeing my friends, and they seem to love that, take that setbacks and obstacles as a challenge. And for
Mhm.
me, like, I'm not that kind of person. I don't, look for challenges and as because like challenges that are bestowed upon me when I was an immigrant, it was painful. I'm not gonna lie, it was painful to go through that. So if if I ask myself, would I go through that willingly, knowingly? I don't think I will, but there are some things that came out of it as good. It was an opportunity for me to connect with other people, to help other people, to create that empathy and compassion. But it was hurtful nonetheless. So, we ask ourselves, how do we how do we be more resilient? How do we become more resilient? What are the steps? Well, I think the topic just as important as resilient is self-care, because for me those experiences, going through that pain and suffering and hurt and grief and hopelessness was important to me, giving that sense of purpose and inspiration and creating that connection with other people. Whereas some people, they can switch gears and immediately thinking, how do I, reflecting on those experiences, how do I use this as opportunity to support others or develop myself? And how do I get better at this? How do I use this knowledge to do good? Um, Whereas for me, people like me, it's almost that as you experience more in life, as you connect with other people, that feelings of motivation and purpose comes naturally. Then all of a sudden, it makes sense as those your personal experiences, personal challenges, or struggles and obstacles kind of fit in your own puzzle. and they'll start to make sense of things in your direction of your life. So when you feel that, right, just take advantage of it. Don't resist it, those feelings of motivation, inspiration. But at the same time, I also think it's quite dangerous to be so hard on yourself. Because as I was going through my struggle, a lot of people, especially my own family, my friends, were saying, how come you're not supposed to, don't feel that way. You're not supposed to feel that way. That's not productive. But, think what you can gain from the situation. Think what you can, what will be the good out of the situation. Think productively, think positively. But I knew what I was supposed to feel, what I was supposed to do, but I wasn't feeling motivated, right? I knew what I had to do, but I didn't want to do any of that. So I think the motivation is huge. But as I was saying, as you come to process your emotions, your feelings of hurt and grief, and as you experience more and connect with other people, that feelings of motivation will come naturally, I believe, for some people. And there are other people who want to, take that as a learning opportunity to reflect on that positively, what I can do better next time, or, you can use that as an opportunity to learn and get to know your about self a little bit more. So yeah, there are different ways, but for me, it can come naturally through experience and through just living your life, living your journey.
You know what? I love what you said around the connection between resilience and self-care, and that's something I definitely want to touch on later on. But one thing I really stood out to me is like this aspect of you should and should not feel. It's like, as what you said, you knew what stage you were at, you knew how you were feeling, you knew what maybe needs to be done at that stage, but you're just not there. You're not in your emotion at a point where you could make those changes, where you could take those decisions, where you could, pursue in that. But
Exactly.
then you get that outsider, as what you said, friends, family, whoever it is, that's outside of yourself, that's saying you should not feel that way. And it's that kind of aspect of taking permission from you to feel your feelings. It's not allowing you to feel. And we know you can't pick and choose between what to feel and what not to feel. You could either numb everything or feel everything, but you can't it's just like, oh, I'll feel the good feelings or the pleasant feelings, and I'm not gonna feel the unpleasant feelings. So it's like, and that is such a good invitation to all of those are listening to us today, that if you are at that stage, if you are at a stage of you're connecting to your emotion, if you're at a stage where you're experiencing the feelings, the unpleasant one, the tough one, the challenging ones, um, that you are allowed to feel those feelings, that you are allowed to have those experiences, and that take your time in them, and that it's important to connect to them because you connect through, not you don't do it despite those feelings. You don't disconnect from the feeling to do the next thing, but rather you connect to your feeling in order to go through those feelings to the next thing. So that's such a powerful invitation, that if you are in that stage, and even if you need support in that stage, please do reach out to us. We do have that support in place for you. um and if you are past that stage, if you are in a stage where you've experienced those feelings, if you are in a stage where now you're trying to make sense, as what you mentioned, of how those experiences in a way all connect together, um, then this is a great tool to reflect and reframe and rethink. How do you find those opportunities in your experiences? Because it seems like everything lies there. Am I getting this right, Jay?
Yeah. It's reframing for sure, reframing. But as you say, Tarek, that I've spent so many years, especially in my adolescence and youth, that's people telling me how I should be feeling, how I
Mhm.
should be reacting, and I have to really talk myself out of, oh, I'm not feeling good enough. I know how I should feel, but I'm not there yet. So is there something wrong with me? Well,
Mm.
people are seem to be coping and being more resilient than me, and there was a lot of internal negative talk. Like, what's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? Why am I not there yet? I know I should be there, but I wasn't. So I really was harsh on myself, and there was that due to those feelings of hurt, not meeting my own expectations of where I should be. But it took me a long time to understand those moments and periods were there for a reason.
You know what, Jay? You said something that's very important. It's like when you got to that point, when everyone's telling you you should feel this way and that way, that didn't just take away of your agency, right? Of your feeling of um trying to explain agency, feeling of being in control of who you are as a unit, as a human being, as a person. But it also got to the point where, like, is there something wrong with me? Because everyone is telling me that I'm supposed to feel this way and I'm supposed to do this. And if I'm not, then there must be something wrong with me. And that internalizing aspect of what others are telling us, which probably, you know, now as I grow up and the more I get to know people and the more I connect to people, everyone has a story, everyone has a journey, everyone has struggles that they go through. And sometimes it's the best advice we have is like, you shouldn't feel that way. Here's what you should feel. Because they're also trying to feel what they're suggesting that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that idea of projecting back and forth of feelings. But then what ends up happening is that question, everyone asking themselves that question, what's wrong with me? Because everyone seems to have their life together,
Yeah.
that seems to have everything going great and well. And they're not just feeling great, they're telling me to feel great. So like they must be at a really great state. So what's wrong with me then? So that internalizing of the issues, where in reality what's happening is we're all struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think anyone has figured life out. And it's like, you know what? I figured it out. This is how life's supposed to be, and this is how it goes, and let's do it. Those challenges are there, and everyone is facing them. I do want to ask you why is this important? Why is the resilience important? Why is understanding and having, as what you said, that like deeper reflection slash reforming of the experience matter in that resilience journey of newcomers?
Um, so, as we mentioned earlier, that, reflecting my own experience, like newcomers, I'm saying we because I'm also considering myself a newcomer here. Um, we face a whole lot of challenges, right? It's like we can't even run away from this. This were almost like we're given to us, you know, learning new language, reinventing the whole, navigating of how to live and adapting to new communication style and social norms of, as simple as like removing the accent to fit in, or someone is saying your name is not English enough, so you got to change your name. So there's so many things that we juggle with and struggle with to adapt, to adjust. And it's tough. Like, there's a lot of stressors involved in adjusting, and not only that, not only the physical part of adjusting, but the psychological part of reframing who you were before and who you are now. That's also is tough, because I had a chat not too long ago. I had a chat with a taxi driver who was working as a taxi driver, but he earned a PhD in medicine back home in Iran. But he came here, as a refugee status. So it wasn't his decision to come. It was almost like he was forced to leave and adjust to new country. And he was saying that the process, the journey of living in a new country, seeing himself as a new identity, that was a stress in itself. He was established in his profession back home, revered in his field. Now I'm not really talking down a taxi driver, but it's a different perception how you see yourself. And I also, had that experience too. For the moment when I came here, for 3 or 4 years, I had to rely on other people who could go speak both Korean and English well to act on my behalf. So I almost gave the decision making to them to make decision for me. And people, they have the good intentions. The people like the teachers and other kids, they have good intentions, but they almost can see you as invisible because they talk to you through the translator who speaks both English and Korean well. So you're considered having voiceless or invisible, and that's tough. That's really tough as a kid who used to be fluent, who loved language, who used language for poems or for any other descriptive purposes. It was tough to re-navigate that situation. But what I'm saying is those struggles can have a meaning later in your life. But it's also important to consider those struggles. You don't have a choice. You face them on as a newcomer here. So that's why the topic of resilience is really important. Is because how you make meaning of things is also as important as you go through the journey of struggle. I know I'm speaking very poetic, but does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I, you touch on different layers that I would love to expand a little bit more on. You spoke about the idea of accent, right? And how like modifying that accent or changing that accent in a way to fit in with what we perceive as the norm, right? Um, or even you spoke about the names or like changing the names, like even something I do, right? When I say my name and introduce myself to people, if they're English speakers, then I would make it in a way that's English accessible. And though it's my name, right? Like I'm putting just as much effort to pronounce their names in a different language. But then when it comes to mine, I'm like downplaying that to make it as easy as possible for. So that whole concept of like westernizing everything, um, from accent to name to experiences in a way to just kind of fit in or belong or connect, that I'm not, in a way, like I'm not a weirdo, I'm not someone from outside of this planet, I'm still the same as you. And how much newcomers and all of us struggle in belonging, in doing this, right, in connecting. um and also that other aspect that you spoke about of which is something so real, and I see it everywhere, and I experience it myself. It's like once you have established your identity elsewhere, you've not just had, in your example, your identity in loving the languages, in connecting with other people, and being someone who's social, who have his circle of friends, who knows how to connect with other people and have conversations, but also other experiences, like you've studied this and that, you became a doctor, you became a lawyer, you became an accountant, and you've established a career. And I've worked with clients who've been, as what you mentioned, doctors for years, some of which has owned hospitals in other countries, and now you know they come here and all of that is taken away from them. That, like, that hit on identity, that hit on you know self-esteem and confidence, it's so real. And I guess all of that really ties together uh, to something I want to go back to, which is the resilience and the self-care, as we go through those experiences that are tough and challenging, and takes away from the confidence, the self-esteem, the agency that we have, and the feeling of wholeness that we had at once. It's it isn't tough enough that you, as what you mentioned, left your friends, your connections, people you care about, people you grow up around, everything that was familiar to you, to go elsewhere, sometimes forcibly. um that was not enough, but also it's like your personal achievements and your personal the things that you've worked so hard to achieve and to get to also taken away from you.
Yeah.
So what how does resilience connect in your perspective to self-care, and in such experiences what kind of self-care would help in both connecting, reframing, um, and reflecting on those experiences?
Yeah. So speaking again, my perspectives are coming from my own experiences. For me, definitely affirming who I am first, acknowledging, accepting who I am was such an important first step because I've gone through that should, right? A lot of people telling me you should do this, you should do that, and there was a feeling of, oh, am I not good enough? I feel like, as you said, Tarek, is a lot of people seem to manage their challenges well. They seem to take on the challenges and opportunities. I feel like I knew what I'm supposed to do. I
Mm-hmm.
should be looking as learning opportunity. I should be thinking this, how do I better myself, or how do I navigate myself, not having that understanding, having that knowledge. But it took me a long time to get to that stage of, oh, I know I should, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't feeling ready. So I guess like the what I'm trying to say is recognizing where you are, right? If you need to, self-care and process how you're feeling your emotions and process grief properly. I think processing the grief is so important. Not many people recognize, because it's a series of adjustments. Because I lived here in my back home for 12 years, all of a sudden, some of the people I've interacted, not all of them, I should say, disregarded some of the things I learned back home. Oh, I remember my ESL teacher saying, my name originally, my Korean name is Jaehyun, and she was saying, no, that's Jaehyun. That's not an English name. I can't even pronounce it. Let's just make
Wow.
it J from Jaehyun. And
Wow.
that's how I became Jay from Jaehyun. And back then I was too little. I was so happy. Oh, I have an English name. But those little things have play a role in putting one culture ahead of my own. So
Mm-hmm.
back then I legitimately thought, Western culture was better than my own. So there was a lot of shaming inside of, I shouldn't be even speaking Korean, right? At home, because English is better than Korean, right? And I had an accent back then, and people were criticizing, why do you speak that way? So you have an accent. And that was that, feeling of shame. And I had to battle that for a long, long time. So as you process that struggle, it is so important to accept who you are, because I believe that is the first step. Because when you try to force yourself, this is what I should do, this is what I should be feeling, you never feel that you're good enough. Like I never felt that I was good enough to to be with other people. That I was never good enough to be in this class, to be in this program, to be in this school. And it was such a like an uphill battle every day, every
Mm-hmm.
year. So once you kind of set go and let go of that expectation, and just accept yourself, and connect with other people, as you journey through your life, as you gain more experience, you will have that motivation and purpose naturally, as I did. But I think the self-care piece is so important. The process, setting the time to process how you're feeling, to properly process that grief and loss, was, for me at least, and coming to the self-acceptance, for me at least, was very important.
Wow. Uh, wow. Okay, so you spoke about this before. I
Mm-hmm.
do want to go a bit deeper into it. That aspect of, here's your English name now. This is not English enough for us. And that is racism. That is such a racist thing to do. And I do want to make it very clear that this is not okay for anyone to experience. And for any of our audience, if you are experiencing anything like that, please do reach out to us. We're here to support you. Uh, what ends up happening in scenarios like that, as what you said, is internalizing someone else's racism, right? To being, oh, well, I'm going to now disconnect from my culture because someone else is telling me that this is not good enough. And that that aspect that you spoke about is like reflecting is so important, because I could then later on sit, maybe sometimes with the help of other people, of adults in my life that I trust and I care for, or uh, other people that I know that could support me in those scenarios, to reflect on, this is not my issue. This is not my fault. This is
Hmm.
someone else racism on projecting on me, right? This is not something that I would need to pay attention to. This is something I need to hold them accountable and responsible for. But then, as what you said, it's like there's that aspect of, well, I was a kid, I didn't know what to do. I now like, okay, well, I apparently now have an English name, and this is my English name. And kind of like disconnecting from the culture, which is a very common experience that many people experience, right? In the beginning, for many people, and sometimes it carries on for really long time. Like, I don't belong there, because if I do, I can't belong here, in a way.
Hmm.
It's like we say we're the most multicultural city in the world, but could you actually coexist in two culture at the same time, simultaneously?
Good question.
It's like, right? It's like, do you, like, could you? Because it sounds like in many experiences, as soon as you get, closer to this, you're like rejected away from this, and vice versa. And that could be in the example that you give, this is your English name, or like the food that someone would eat is like, oh, the smell of this food, I've personally experienced
Yeah,
that, right? Like
that
all
too.
of those experiences, like, well, after all, later on in life, you go and order the same dish I was eating, and you're like, oh, this dish is so good. Like, so where was that racism early on, right? Like, it's like those experiences are so real and so strong and so important to talk about. Um, and I, I just can't really tolerate racism in any way. And
But you
uh,
know what's funny though? What's
tell
funny
me,
though, they had, I remember that she had good intentions. Like I remember the ESL teacher had really good intentions. Like she cared for me, but her mind was, you're here in Canada, so you gotta, remove everything that um, and like do isn't wrong. So you gotta adjust here. And that's, as a kid, like there was a power dynamics. I didn't know better. Like I thought that was, I legitimately thought, oh, she was right. But I think that what happens here is newcomers, the agencies often stripped away. So which means
yeah,
you don't really know enough to make decisions on you. And that's why it is most impactful when the people who are helping you to make that kind of mindset and have that mindset to help you, and they do believe it. It is such a
mm-hmm.
powerful impact on immigrants and newcomers, and often, unfortunately, leads to like shaming your own culture. Which what happened to me. Your food smells. I'm afraid to have my food, my Korean food in cafeteria because what if it smells? What if it bothers people, other people, and we're not speaking language at home and trying so hard to removing my accent. Um, but because I thought she was right, I thought growing up that she was the authority, right?
Yeah, like the adult figure, they're the authority. They're telling you what to do, and as a kid, you don't really have many options. And you named it. You're like, it took away from the agency. And once you take someone's agency away, like I remember at times when I stood, when I didn't, we didn't have banking as a big deal back home. Only those who are rich would have a bank account. You don't need a bank account to kind of go on in your life. Um, so when I came here, I didn't speak the language. Same thing. It's like had the translator um, helping in translating and in opening an account. And you bet I didn't have a say in what options did I want to, because I didn't even know the options. The options are being told to me through the translator, who is saying, you have this option and you have that option, but I would recommend going with this option. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going with this option. I don't have enough knowledge, nor I could seem to have, the ability to go back and forth between, okay, well, explain a little bit more on that to make, an informed decision. It's not something that you would do when you have translator. You try to minimize the amount of words that you would say, the questions that you would ask, because it's like that aspect of navigating is there's someone else navigating, there's someone else in the driver's seat, you're just the passenger now, right? And you're looking at the road, you're seeing where things are going, but you can't really, or who's controlling that. And that once that agency is taking away, it's like we then accept people's racism and take it in and internalize it, right? So that is so powerful. And that is just one challenge of so many that newcomers face.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you faced. What are other ones that you think of, that you could think of, that newcomer face specifically around resilience?
It's like the constant feeling that I should be somewhere else, like I should be this space, not here. So, I work with a lot of newcomers, and, coming from a newcomer and seeing my parents, the language of should comes around a lot, right? So that's why I'm not stressing too much on what you need to do to become resilient. It seems like you already know. They know how you should do, or you should be feeling, you should act upon, how you should navigate in those circumstances, how you should use these experiences for something good. But it leads to a burnout quickly, at least from my experience, because you're not accepting who you are, in a nutshell. And that's like the bridge between who you are right now and who you should be. That was such a painful experience, and it created a lot of labels for who I should be and who I am now. And like, the example of me being mediocre student, right? And I should be an A student. I should be using this experience to be an A student, but I'm not there yet. But I should be there. So this is just like managing that level of stress and anxiety around should was tough, for sure. Then, as you further perpetuate through using these labels, using the should language, they like define you. It's like, those labels, they start to define who you are. So I've seen some of my friends, they use their stifling language to define who they are. And, from that definition or concept of who they are, how they see themselves, they limit opportunities that come to their ways. And it was so unfortunate thing to see. It's, what, like that is for someone who speaks better, who has good communication skills, and I'm not that, so I'm not going to even apply. I'm not going to even join that community because I'm not that kind of person. And it's so sad to see the limiting conversations you put on yourself because of that labels. And that was really unfortunate to see from a lot of different communities, for sure. I don't know if I answered your question directly, but sorry, I was
you brought up, yeah, no, you did. You brought up important points, and I mean, if we were to name all the challenges that newcomer face, I think we will be going live for an entire week, in order to touch on all of that. This aspect of should be and should, I would say, is like one of the easy one, right? You get that you have to, and you don't have other options, and here's what you do. Like, it's not even a suggestion. Here's what you do. Like, that's it. Here's what you do. Go ahead, do it. And it's like, where should you be? Exactly where you are. You shouldn't be anywhere else. No one else should be able to should tell you what to do. There's enough agency that's taken away from you, that if adults around you and people in your community don't support you to rebuild and reconnect to your agency, it's just gonna be going downhill from there, right? It's gonna become more struggling as an adult, because if you did not have that agency and that experience of agency as a kid, it feels the same thing as an adult. You still need someone else's direction, someone else's decisions in order to kind of move forward. Uh,
Yeah.
Jay, what are some of the ways that you see as ways to navigate or overcome or kind of uh, yeah, like navigate those challenges that you mentioned that newcomers face?
I think that's a really good question because I think using the so not putting any labels I think is huge because we often say, oh, this is a bad experience, this is a good experience, but experience is experience. I noticed that all of the experiences that I had, albeit painful, they serve a purpose to a larger degree, to larger kind of my life big picture. But as you start to label these experiences and how they define you in that moment, as you start to do that, and you have that label, you start to have that labels that limit your potential, and that limit your opportunities to connect with other people, limit your opportunities to grow yourself fully. But I would say allow yourself to process feelings as well as you go through a lot of challenges and hurt, but at the same time allow the experiences to unfold naturally. And don't so force yourself, don't be so hard on yourself to be the adapt, embody the should or have to language, because that can lead to deflation or burnout quickly. But allow multiple experiences, and as you process these emotions, as you practice self-care, at one day in your future those experiences hopefully will make sense into larger sense as you work with other people who are in a similar journey, or as you work with the communities who you can empathize with and show compassion based on your experiences, and that the experiences you had before will play a role in that. And that's huge. That's not for me, I think I benefited from not saying no to certain opportunities, and that's how I got here. But in that moment it's also important to practice self-care, because should or have to language didn't work for me. And a lot of communities know what they should do, what they have to do, right? They know what kind of questions they should ask themselves to get out of that situation logically, but psychologically maybe they're not ready yet. So that's why I always stress self-care, but then not trying to see experiences as a black and white, this is good or bad. That's also helpful to navigate and process those experiences.
That's very, very true. I think that aspect of you could know it logically, you could know it intellectually and understand it, but emotionally, not necessarily you're there yet. And it needs the combination of both. It needs all of them together combined to kind of get you to the place where you could move on and go to the next stage. And as you know, our show is open for questions, and I do want to encourage audience to ask questions, and we'll take some questions as we go and some towards the end. But please do ask your questions around today's topic. One of the questions that we received is, what kind of emotional turbulence newcomer go through? And I think this is one of the questions that it's really hard to answer because there's so much, right?
There's so
There's
many
so many
layers.
changes. There's
Mhm.
so many layers. It's I would say, if any, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah,
What do you think, Jay?
it is a roller coaster, but there's definitely it's like the feeling of loss, I would say. It's a feeling of loss and grief, and it's hurt because you're you know wounding, you're carrying wounds on things you lost. I'm not just saying that you lost money, position, status, but you're like losing all of the memories, all of the sense of belonging, all of that. You're losing that. So there was, in the moment when you come here as an immigrant, a lot of that was just grief,
Mhm.
feeling, readjusting. There's an excitement as well, but there's a grief. Um, I don't want to always shine the negative, but the feelings of grief. But there was an excitement of living in a new country, but soon came grief. Um, yeah,
I love what you said, and there's the stages of grief, right, by Elizabeth, and she was very talented in how she brought things together. And one of the things that she said, we've all still kind of went in a different direction, but one of the things that she said is, this is from the experience and the data that she collected, what stages of grief may look like, but there's no way to describe the stages of grief. And I was like, that is so powerful, because that's so true. Like, this is what we could imagine what that look like, but how the trip gonna go in between them, how you come one step forward, three step backwards, and go from stage to another, and many other stages that are mentioned and not mentioned that you would experience as an individual. So it's so true that grief, that kind of like, I've lost so many things, and I'm now not just trying to process the loss, but there's kind of this first basic need layer before I even try to process that. I need to figure out, I need to start speaking to people. I need to learn that language. I need to, find a place to live. I need to find a job. I need to find a school. I need to find all of those basic needs that even delay the journey of grieving
That's a really
and
good
going
point.
through those experiences, right? Because you got those basic needs that you're always going to be top priority. You can't go intellectually to start processing things or emotionally if you're at a point where you don't have food tonight. And so there's that mix of so many things that are happening at the same time. And it's not like, you come to Canada, you get a house and you get a school and everything's ready for you. And you're just like, all right, well, now we're good to go. It takes years to build that, right? And many struggles and many difficulties. It takes years to learn a language. So I would say there's so many different feelings that newcomer go to and through and experience, and different stages of loss and different experiences, and kind of where they are, who they're with, and who's around them, and who their support system is. All of that determined how those experiences going to look like.
Yeah. And I also wanted to add that there's so many different factors, and we talked about the individual level, but as you say, there are social support systems, the environment which one is at, and it's not linear, right? It's not like, oh, you know what, I am done grieving. Well, there are certain moments in my life I still grieve the things I had back home. So it's not linear. It's not, a linear trajectory. This is stage one, stage two, stage three, or four, or five. No, it's just constantly. Sometimes you have to go one step, to go one step forward, and just steps, three steps backwards. And it'll be constantly going back and forth, toggle. But it depends a lot on the environment, the support system, your relationship. That plays significant role. And because I also place the importance of the people I was around, the people, the colleagues, the friends, my family. I had an amazing support system. So I can't really say, and this is why I can't really say, do X, Y, and Z, you'll feel better. No, because everyone's life and their context is so different from mine. That's why I emphasize this is coming from my experience, but also emphasize that there are a lot more elements to it than just, you got to do X, Y, and Z. As an individual, then you'll get better. No, it doesn't. It doesn't really work that way because there's a social component.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to touch on that outside of the individual aspect, because in the Western society, we seem to be very invested in only the individual and not looking as much at the surrounding. And I do also want to add to, like, the status that you would have would change a lot of things, right? Being an immigrant, and in no way I think that experience is an easy experience, right? But but being an immigrant, in most cases, not all, it's a decision that you made yourself, right? To immigrate to another country. Despite the circumstances, there has definitely been circumstances that made you take that decision. And or you could also be the kid, not the father, right? So you didn't have as much say in that decision. But somehow it was, in many cases, not all, optional. But you get to, for example, refugees, it's like you did not have a say. You did not decide that, regardless if you're the caregiver or the person in care, you did not have a decision in this. It happened to you. And there's more of not just the emotional curve that would come from being forced, but also from the experiences that you've lived prior to leaving and coming to another country. And but even that as an experience, like I went through that experience, right? Like as a refugee from Syria, it's like I've lived through that, and I know how tough it is, and I know how many things I need to work on mental health wise in order to kind of work on the struggles and the experiences that I face and the trauma that I went through. But you add then another layer. If I at least came here with a permanent residency as soon as I landed here, right? But then if you're a refugee claimant, if you come here and claim refugee here, now you added another 3, 4, 5, who knows, at times, years to even get that title of now you could stay here. Now you're safe to stay in this country. And throughout it, you're building, but you don't even know what you're building towards, because at any point immigration could say, you know what, we're not accepting your file, get your stuff and get out of here. And that is so heartbreaking. Like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, in that question, there's so many complex feelings that people would go through, really depending on so many factors that they may experience. And as you said, we focus on the individual. So I do want to jump into not just the individual, but the community, right? What, as a community, what is our shared responsibility in supporting those newcomers to become more resilient, to have the tools to reflect, to have the tools to rethink and reframe their experiences, and get to the point not even to settle and meet the basic needs that we spoke about, but to thrive and belong.
Yeah, it's just, like, and this goes back to our previous conversation of, there are people who have the intention of helping, right? Who bring the good intentions, but maybe how they go about helping others maybe could be questionable. The reason I say this is just, there is tremendous power dynamics between the newcomer and helpers, right? And whereas the approach is helping the newcomers to undermine their cultural experiences, it can be questionable. And that leaves huge lasting impact on newcomers. Um, and like the examples of renaming someone, giving them English names, or removing the accent. Because I came here around 2000, and there was tremendous effort to westernize the newcomers,
Mm-hmm.
as to undermine our own experiences in Korean. And I had to really battle that, to think this through, process. Not one is better than the other, but you see a lot of dynamics happen at an individual level, where the community supports are based on Western values and is considered as default. And it could be due to efficiency, due to normalcy, but as reframing in the understanding where Western values are prioritized over the individual, their country's unique values, then it gives them the message: you're here, you got to follow our ways. And that creates another set of barriers as individuals trying to develop their resiliency. But instead, as we approach through using non-judgmental approach, using curiosity, right, using really being curious, being or getting to know other person and where that person's coming from, getting to understand their journey, is a lot more helpful, because then they could see, oh, I know something that they don't know. They treat me as equals, as opposed to, yeah, I'm here, I've been living here and you're a newcomer, so you got to follow my ways, You are somewhat less than me. I have more knowledge than you here. As opposed to, you know what, I don't really know your name or your where you come from, your country, but would like to know. Help me understand. That perspective, you're putting you both the newcomer and the people who are here as equals in approaching, in supporting the newcomers. And I feel like that's more helpful because the newcomers can see, oh, they really value what I have to say. They really want to listen and learn what I could offer. And that, I think, plays a key critical role in supporting newcomers adjusting in Canada.
I love what you said because that really does acknowledge the hierarchy, right? That exists. Like, I came here first, so you're gonna do it my way. And that, we know we live in a white supremacist society, but this is not even the issue here. Like this is a huge issue, and I can't wait to discuss that in many sessions to come with you. But you get that, but you get towards that also like, oh, I came here first, so like you gotta do it my way. And I'm like, I wonder what Indigenous people would say when they hear that, right? It's like, oh, seriously? Seriously? Because that's not the system you followed. So it's like, well, now you get to do it my way. And if that colonialism aspect of, I'm going to make you me, but I'm not going to even accept you. Like, I'm going to try to make you as close as possible to how I am, but you're still not me. So like, you're still less, right? You're still not there. I'm still the higher, in a hierarchy, higher than you are, right? On the spectrum, I'm all the way up there. And it's like, do you even see me as a human? And do you see me as like, well, this is a very different experience than you are. And instead of saying, I actually don't know, and I would love to learn because I'm curious and approaching, as you said, like with a lens of curiosity, it's sometimes even that fear of saying that becomes more of like, it's easier to judge than approach it with curiosity. It's easier to say, you change your way than show me what is your way, and I'll see if I could learn something or two from you. And maybe you could learn one or two things from me too. It's like that aspect of we're working together versus like, oh no, you do it my way, and that's right. And that is so huge. So thank you for mentioning that. How can we do better as a society, Jay? We, as organizations, we do spend a lot of time trying to figure out ways to support the communities, but that is only one aspect, right? What, as a society, what could we do?
I think you touched on something there, and it's the willingness to be uncomfortable in order to celebrate diversity. Because as you say, Toronto and GTA is a diverse region, but a lot of ways are, the westernized ways of doing things have been considered as default. And because people, there are many reasons, but I've seen one of the many reasons is, I don't want to go there, I don't want to touch it, because that could open a whole can of worms, and maybe I could backfire, because we're living in an era of sensitivity. So what if I don't want to be seen as racist, I don't want to be seen as white supremacist in a way, so I don't even want to go there. So I'm not going to even explore what I'm thinking, and not even embody the curious mindset to entertain my thought with you. I'm not pointing fingers, but I've noticed this happening, the dynamics happening in organizations I worked in the past, or within communities, because I don't, there is not enough level of trust for me to kind of entertain that thinking. But so they default to their own ways of doing, which is the Eurocentric ways of, oh yeah, let's get you to remove that accent, get you to change your name so that it's easier for me to pronounce. Whereas I think it's more helpful to go through that relationship building one-on-one. It takes more time and effort and energy and maybe a little bit more struggle, but you're meeting them where they are as equals, as opposed to, I came here before you, I know the way, and you need to go through my ways in order to be a Canadian, quote unquote. But embodying that curious mindset, I try to know someone holistically, where they're from and what they bring here and what kind of diverse ways that they bring here, is to really celebrate diversity and inclusion, right? As there are so many initiatives nowadays in the world, in Canada. So embodying really relationship building and curious mindset is simple, simple as I don't know, but can you help me learn? Like, I really want to learn, and willing to make mistakes on the way, but willing to be corrected by them. But that whole process of learning is uncomfortable. So it's almost like you're putting yourself out there and you're willing to learn, right? Through mistakes, through challenges, through struggles. And that, easier said than done, I gotta say. That's why I'm a little bit cautious of saying it. But that's how you build relationships. That's how you get to know people, because their ways of doing things may be different from you, the westernized process, right? For instance, they may not, meet you in contact meet your gaze or see your eyes when they speak, or they may not respect your personal boundary, personal space. But it's not like, oh, you're wrong person, you're not supposed to do that, right? But it's understanding what those practices mean, what they mean when they in their back home, in their home country, right? Having that understanding mind, as opposed to,
Yes.
you're in my space, you shouldn't even do that. But having the understanding, oh, is that your practice back home, right? Having that, curious mindset to want to know more about their culture. I think that is so important. But it's the willingness to sit through discomfort, I would say.
And I agree with you. It does take a lot of courage. I remember the words of Brene Brown, um, which is she has a PhD and she did a lot of work in regarding shame, and she speaks about courage. She called herself a shame researcher. Um, yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with her, and she speaks about the internal biases, and she speaks about how it's like the more isolated you are, it's not a matter of do you have any biases. It's like how many, right? How many and how deep and where they are and where they're at and how do you explore them. And I feel like that's so real. It's like it really takes a lot of courage in order to come forward and say, I don't know. Could you tell me? Could you show me the world in your eyes? Could you show me your world from your lens? And it's amazing because once you start doing that, you, instead of being exposed to one way of doing things and the way, and we both know there's no such a thing as the right way and the wrong way. There's multiple ways. All ways take you to Rome, kind of thing, right? It's what way do you want to take? But it actually gives you and provide you with so many options and so many other ways of doing things. Like as simple as cooking, right? Like you could be of a specific culture and cook that very food and eat it for the rest of your life. And that would definitely be satisfying, right? But then having the option to eat and make and explore other food and other cultures, like, oh, whoa, like this is a whole new world that exist beyond you, that exist beyond how important you think you are, right? Like, and I feel like that is so true and important to kind of reflect on and think about whenever we have conversation on what's the responsibility of the society, what could we do to make sure that you are offering as much of a comfortable space as for newcomers, because I don't care where you're coming from. You once were a newcomer,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yes.
So like, don't don't forget about that. Really don't. Unless you're indigenous, then that's
Exactly.
it. And I love that. I have those many talks with my youth and people I work with, and when they're describing a white person, and I'm like, okay, so what's their talking and having conversations, they're like Canadian, and I'm like, oh, Canadian, okay, we all are Canadian, but like, could you be a bit more specific? Like, no, like they're white Canadian, like the actual Canadian. And I'm like, okay, we gotta have a conversation about this, right? Because in our head, it's like kind of ingrained that's like, that's what the Canadian are, and this is what you kind of see that lens
Image,
from. And
yeah.
like, unless you're talking about a native person, that is a different conversation. But like, it's so interesting. Jay, I'm loving the conversation, and I can't wait to have more of this conversation.
Same here.
I do, thank you. I do want to know, what is your message to to people that you work with, something you've learned, if you can share with us, that would want to share it with newcomers, if it's from your experience, from your professional experience, that might help them through this journey.
I think one thing I do want to say is take everything, the experiences you may call bad and good and ugly as part of your journey, because those will somehow make sense as you live your life, as you interact with other people, and they can serve you a larger purpose. And also, I do want to emphasize, be shine on your own feet, which what I mean by that is, you're a holistic person, you have a lot to offer, right? And there may many people in your circle, and their circle would say, that's, you shouldn't be feeling that way, you should be feeling this way, you ought to be this, you ought to be that, you have to do this. But you know yourself best at the end of the day. So you know when you're ready or not to take on this personal development, professional development journey. And if you're not in the right mindset, that's okay, because you know when you're not ready, you need to self-care. So I know that many of the other people who are in your circle would say those things out of love and passion. But at the end of the day, you are the pilot in your own life. You're on the driver's seat. You determine the course of life. And self-care, and as Tarek mentioned, there are many of you who are not fortunate enough to self-care, but self-care as you need to, before thinking about, oh, I have to do this, I have to use this, I have to learn from this, because it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy, effort, and emotions to be on that space. And sometimes the passion and motivation to use those experiences will come at a later time. The reason I say this is because many of the people I work with, they already embody the growth mindset. So that's why I want to encourage more self-care piece as they go on through this self-development journey.
I love that, and I do want to also acknowledge that self-care as a concept, as things that we do for ourselves, something that we're all still learning how. We're all still learning how to do it, what is more effective for us. As what you said, it's not linear. It's not like set in stone, just do this and you'll be fine. There's so many ways to practice self-care. And in a way, it's just like, if I would use few words to define what self-care is, I'd say like, it's a combination of self-awareness and self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like that word, self-compassion.
yeah, and like being in a way, being that friend that you would be for someone else, and talking to yourself in the same language you would use if one of your loved ones is going through the struggle that you are going through. And kind of like pushing away a little bit of that critique that is inside of us, that we spoke about earlier. And I do acknowledge that many of us may be unfamiliar with self-care and self-care practices. So if you are, please do reach out to us, because we are more than willing and have the capacity to support you on that journey, on exploring more of self-care tools and practices that would work for you, and work with you on coming up with some that specifically, um, you know, works for you, and kind of like do that experiment aspect, because not each skill kind of work for everyone, right? Jay, I loved our discussion. I'm sure the audience loved it too. And how can we get more of you? How do we, if people want to reach out, what else do you offer? What can they benefit from? How do they get in touch with you? How can people, what kind of conversation would Jay have with people if they reach out?
Sure. I always love talking about this. I was talking to you, the Tarek, the other day, that like I would just go on this topic for hours and hours. So if do anyone wants to reach out to me, or I think Tarek has my contact information, I would be more than happy to talk about this, some of the things on the phone, or we could have an email exchanges and whatnot. I also run workshops on topics of building resilience and self-care and self-acceptance, and building the growth mindset as part of the leadership training. Because I do believe that we do, as leaders, we do need to take care of ourselves first before we take care of other people. So we do talk about that extensively. So those of you who are part of my training will talk to more about that. There's one TED Talk that I recommend that you watch if you're really interested in the topic of resilience and finding opportunities and self-acceptance. It's by Andrew Solomon. The TED Talk is called "How the Worst Moments in Our Lives Make Us Who We Are," and you can search that on YouTube. But I think Tarek, you can send that out, right, to the viewers.
Yeah, we'll make sure that both your contact information and how can people reach out to you, as well as the video you recommended, will be in the commentary box under this video. Jay, thank you so much for being so honest and so straightforward and direct and truthful in those conversations, because it needs that, right? It needs people who say it as is and be as honest and willing and courageous to share their stories and say, hey, this is what happened to me, and this is how what I experienced and how it impacted me and what I learned from it. So thank you so much for being that person and for sharing your story with us. It's an honor to hear that story. Any last word you want to give before we end the session today?
It was definitely my pleasure being here. I love talking about this stuff of, some social issues, social justice aspect of self-care and resilience. And I consider myself a very authentic and honest person. And I do believe honest goes a long way in building really true, authentic relationship within people and the community. And there is a starting point of creating this sense of belonging and inclusion. And as we create this inclusive community, I do believe that's the first step.
I love that, and I do see that authenticity in you, and throughout our discussions, and just so present and so real and so connecting. To have that authenticity there, and that true self who's like really sharing from a perspective of empowerment and perspective of true experiences. One more time, thank you so much for joining me today, and to our audience, thank you so much for being the support, for listening to us, for having those conversations, for asking questions. I will see you on August 5th, next in 2 Thursdays from now, for our finale episode of Subtle, Thrive, and Belong for this season. Until then, please do stay safe and take care and enjoy the summer as we are experiencing less restrictions nowadays. Thank you all for listening to me and for being present with us, and I'll see you all soon.